Okay, we've got a lot to get through, so I guess it's 12:31. We may as well crack on and do that. So I hope you've been enjoying a little bit of festive cheer in the background there while we've been waiting. And we'll just fire straight away. So, hi everyone, I'm Rod Middleton. I'm the PI of the UKMS Register, based here at Swansea University Medical School. We try and do these webinars every year just to give you an update of what's going on with the register and feature some of our excellent researchers who make use of the register data and all the stuff that you give us over the years. So hopefully this will be interesting for you. So first of all, thanks for joining us. The plan for this session is obviously what we've just done, the welcome and summary. First off, then Dr. Owain Howell, whose screenshot of his title, because he changed it at the last minute, is showing in the top right here, is identifying distinct disability trajectories in the path to rapidly worsening MS. Will be immediately after me. And finally, we'll have Una Reid, who is a participant of the UKMS Register and one of our brainstormers from our PPI group as well. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. So three great speakers, I'm sure you'll agree. So the register has now been running since 2011, but we made a major change in 2018 and shifted to 6 monthly questionnaires from 3 monthly questionnaires. And I just thought it'd be interesting to show you all what that looks like when we look at the regular questionnaires over time. Obviously, we ask many more questionnaires than that, but we ask anxiety, depression, fatigue, impact of MS, impact on walking, quality of life, and the web EDSS as well. And you can see roughly we have about 6,000 people come back every 6 months and give us continuous ongoing answer to those questionnaires. And that sort of, it goes up and down a little bit. We had a bit of a bump post-COVID, but they're sort of tailing down a little bit at the moment. But in general, we get really good responses from you. And it's just to encourage you and remind you, come back every 6 months. It really makes a difference. And hopefully we'll emphasize why as we go through this. Specifically looking at 2025, we've had 5 publications in peer-reviewed journals. That's a big deal for those of us who in academia, but they're in high impact factor ones as well. Things you may have heard of like Nature Communications. It's quite a big deal that we get those kind of things published. We've attended 5 conferences and presented 12 abstracts and given presentations at some of them as well. We've added 6 new NHS sites this year, including the Walton Centre in Liverpool, so that's quite nice. We've attended 7 people with MS in-person participant events, newly diagnosed days and things like that, all around the country, including Leeds, London, Swansea and Wrexham. We've added 1,811 new participants via our clinical and portal, and altogether 99,740 new questionnaires have been answered in 2025. And I think that's an amazing achievement. I'd like to take the opportunity to say that the 2025 lifestyle questionnaires are now open. We'll send an email about that again later this week, hopefully. But if you have got a little bit of time to come and answer these, that's a sort of out of bounds, not normal core questionnaires that we've answered that we've made available. We did this last year as well. If you log into your dashboard, you'll be able to see them there. I'd like to take the opportunity to say that the 2025 lifestyle questionnaires are now open. We'll send an email about that again later this week, hopefully. But if you have got a little bit of time to come and answer these, that's a sort of out of bounds, not normal core questionnaires that we've answered that we've made available. We did this last year as well. If you log into your dashboard, you'll be able to see them there. And it looked like this. People answered in December and January 2024 into 2025 with almost 4,000 responses to all those things. And we can see a few eager types have actually gone and answered some of them this year already for them too. So please come and do that. It's really important. And just to give you an example why, the sleep questionnaire that we asked last year, we were able to identify that people who were poor sleepers had higher fatigue, higher anxiety and depression, and were more affected by their MS than those who got better night's sleep. So being able to look at that over time, I think, is going to be really important for us to get a better idea of what's going on with that slightly underreported condition in MS and maybe do more research into it. So that's why we ask these kinds of things. I am coming to the end of my little bit, but I just want to point out that next year will be 15 years of the UKMS Register. We're celebrating a fairly major birthday, so in sort of preparation for that, we're getting some big numbers together. We have now more than 30 million rows of data collected, either direct from the NHS or from people with MS submitting it. We have almost 50,000 people with MS engaged. That's almost a third of the population of people with MS in the UK. We've worked with more than 440 NHS staff at more than 55 NHS sites in those 14 years. We've produced 70 publications in high impact factor journals and beyond. We've supported other research studies with the UKMS Register, such as Octopus, Trusted, and the MS Pregnancy Register. And more than 200 researchers, including some of the ones who you're about to see, have worked with the UKMS Register data. So you can imagine the huge collaboration that's gone on as part of the UKMS Register. So that's just a little overview of what we've been up to in 2025. And I'm going to now introduce Dr. Owain Howell, who is a senior lecturer here at Swansea University Medical School and an honorary research lecturer at the Division of Brain Sciences at Imperial College London. His interest is the neuropathology of MS, and he has previously worked at the UK MS Register Tissue Bank in London. Owain has worked closely with the Register, most recently looking into progressive MS. This work was presented at, he's about to present was presented at 2025 at the ECTRIMS conference in Barcelona, which is the world's largest annual meeting dedicated to MS research and is attended by more than 9,500 delegates.
Okay, great. So the title's a bit convoluted, but hopefully we can all make some sense of it by the end. And there's a lot of people being involved in the work I'm going to talk about and present. And a really, really big thank you to the Register team, to Ellie, to Rod, to Leah, and all for your continued support and obviously the opportunity to share some of our work with you today. And I wanted to do this bit first because when I did speak in that conference that Rod mentioned, the timer had finished and I was over time and I didn't get to thank the important people. Okay, so big thanks to Sarah and Rod, like I was saying, part of the Register, Richard Nicholas as well, who's a guiding light for us across all the work we do, and then some of the team in Swansea, including Will and Mia, who started the work that flourished into this project a number of years ago as undergraduate students as well. And there's my effort at festivities in the bottom corner as well. So as a research group at Swansea, we're in a different building to Rod, but we do get to bump into each other once in a while. And as Rod said, now we're interested in really the drivers of disability progression and why people experience MS the way they do, really. So there are lots of components of MS which give us a sense of somebody's MS journey, and that can include factors like lifestyle, the age which they first experienced the MS symptoms, and the type of symptoms which they had right at the start of the disease. And they can be sort of partly representative then or predictive of what the next few years of MS might be like. But they have a limited value, I think, in terms of really being able to tell somebody living with MS how their MS might look in 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years' time, for example. So part of the work we do, and certainly the work we've done with the Register in the last 18 months or so, has been trying to look around that question and trying to understand this sort of variability, the uniqueness of MS, isn't it, I think, and why some people, and the focus here now is on those very few people, I think, who start to experience quite substantial disability over the longer term. And so that's the real focus of this session from me. And I guess that the descriptors we have for MS aren't particularly great, and there's probably a move now away from this kind of classical, quite dogmatic view really of MS as either a kind of a relapsing onset that transitions to secondary progression for some people, or for others then this kind of slow progressive worsening from onset. And we know this is kind of not particularly great example of MS on the individual basis. Lots of very clever people now have looked at the MS experience over many years in people, if I get my laser pointer up. And these are plotting some of the different experiences of MS in people with PPMS, for example. Some only experience very modest changes in their EDSS scores over a couple of decades, while others see quite rapid changes in severity. While the descriptor of PMS is kind of a catch-all, but it really hides a lot of the nuance, the subtlety, the uniqueness of this condition. Then I think the people who are experiencing it. So our focus really is on trying to unpick some of these differences, and then by finding some of these differences, can we help answer some important questions? So this is thanks to Google AI, this little picture. I'm not sure how we kind of blended those paths together, but the idea is of people looking at people's different MS journeys, really. And why is it different? And if we look at groups of people who were broadly experiencing a similar kind of journeys through the progressive phase of MS, what can we really learn by looking at these different groups, and what impact can that have, I think, for thinking about trial designs and treatments and other ways of monitoring multiple sclerosis. So, teaming up with Rod and the Register and work with the Tissue Bank as well, and with colleagues out in Verona, we looked to sort of break this study down into The first part really is looking to kind of identify the cohorts, the groups of people experiencing these kind of similar journeys over a number of years through MS, and where we most focus on kind of the disability worsening, the progression that's been experienced. And then we're looking at kind of the individual factors, the characteristics of those groups, the demography, the clinical picture, so in terms of some information about relapses, the treatments that people are on, how the MRI scans looked, and then also then where kind of the strength of some of the work we do in the lab in Swansea then is looking at some of the biological differences as well. So to look at this study, we made great use of the register. Sarah Knowles, Rod and the gang have been incredibly helpful and ran this part of the study, looking at lots of that questionnaire data which Rod was flagging earlier on. We also teamed up then with some fantastic brain imaging scientists, so MRI scientists and clinicians based in the north of Italy, who have been scanning people with MS and following them up for a long number of years. So we get to see what things were on their scans very early on and how their MS has changed in the following decades. And then also the bit where we can have most impact then is looking at some of those biological differences. And that was by teaming up with the UK MS Tissue Bank as well. And the hope really is that by doing this work, we'll get a better understanding of some of those factors, those variables then which are associated with progression. And if we understand those variables a bit better, can we perhaps think about ways of improving, better targeting treatment, maybe the switching of treatments at the right times for the right people. And also by understanding more about what underlies the disease, we can probably come up, or we should be able to identify some better ways of monitoring, so better biomarkers perhaps of progression. So let's start with the MS register data. So these groups are based solely on the MSIS, so the Multiple Sclerosis Impact Severity Scale questionnaire, which takes a few minutes to go through, doesn't it? And the real strength of these questionnaires is people who come back and complete them again and again and again. So we can see then how multiple sclerosis is changing for a person over many years. And this data makes use of MSIS scores, which have been completed on a number of occasions in succession then. So a sort of a streak of completed MSIS scores. And looking at this data and using some fantastic statistical modelling, which I generally have very little idea how it works, but Sarah and the gang certainly seem to know their onions here. They were able to look at these sort of longitudinal data. So people completing questionnaires, each of the little grey bits here now would be an individual completing questionnaires over a number of years. And then the data then looks to fit a line which best represents this kind of complex mesh of data. And by doing that and looking at over 2,000 individuals' responses, and each person responding at least 5 times to the MSIS questionnaire, I was able to model disability worsening, and the statistical model best represents this data in 3 ways, where about a third of the people completing questionnaires in the 10 years, over the 10 years, the questionnaire has been running, about a third of those people represents MS, which was relatively stable. So starting with a moderate level of disability, their MS typically, on average, did not significantly worsen during that time. The majority, so just over 50% of people, experienced a slowly worsening multiple sclerosis. That means that MSIS scores slowly crept up on average, but over this decade length of time. And then a minority of people, and this is a group we're kind of most interested in just in this presentation. So about just under 1 in 5 people, so 370 people from over 2,000 people experienced quite a rapid change in their MSIS physical rating scores. And that change, you can spot here, so this is over years at the bottom, going across 10 years. That change happens really quite soon from the baselining of this data, so from the start of the observation period. So all these people who answered these questionnaires all started at a moderate level of disability, and then we were looking at how that disability changed then over the intervening years. And I think what's really important is that early phase was actually very similar for everyone. So everyone started at about a similar level of MSIS rating. No real difference in age or the age at study start. And many would have been on treatment and have been known, been seen by their neurologist and their doctor for a number of years before this observation window. So what clues exist now in people who sometimes take this very different path in their MS? So there's lots more data here. I don't want to bog you down with this. I can't help it being somebody's interested in the numbers, so we'll try and keep to the key facts. So looking at now the characteristics of people who belong to these different treatments. Looking at the register data, we're able to see a minority of people who experience quite a different path of their MS, a much more severe and rapidly changing MS. And we're really interested in kind of what's behind that. What are some of the bigger changes which were observed in some of those people? So this is why we teamed up with a team in Verona, Damiano and Max, and they identified then in their patient groups they've been looking at and working with for many, many years, groups of people whose MS remained relatively stable, some who became secondary progressive, and then some others then who experienced secondary progression and a bit more disability, so a slightly more advanced level of disability. And they looked back then at the MRI scans they captured right at the start of their MS, to see what maybe was different very early on. So are there features, are there signs early on which could help us unpick or help us maybe identify people who were maybe slightly more at risk then of this rapidly worsening course. So the uniqueness really, I think, of this data set is that Damiano and Max in Verona do MRI scans which are not conventional. They do some amazing sequences called double inversion recovery sequences, really kind of neat MRI tricks that help you see different parts of the tissue to a much, much better level of detail than you would in a conventional NHS scan, for example. And we were really interested in what was happening in the cortex, that kind of computing part of our brain, because we had some sense that there may be some changes as here. In this graph on the right now, we find out for those individuals who had few cortical lesions, CLs, compared to those who had a number of cortical lesions right at their start of their MS. Those with a higher number of cortical lesions were much more likely over the intervening years now, so we're talking about 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, much more likely to experience this more worsening, rapidly worsening MS. So this is giving us some clues that there are changes both in how people feel, so ideas sort of self-perceived impression of depression and fatigue. Also then on the scans as well were a little bit different in some people who later experienced this course. And then quickly then the bits that we can make a contribution to is looking at the pathology, so the biological differences. And we did that by looking at some groups of cases we identified within the MS tissue bank, which is this incredible resource, like an internationally leading resource like the MS Register as well. And we coupled data from the MS tissue bank and did our analysis of Swansea to see that, to find actually that we saw much more inflammation, more active, so more new lesions were still emerging in the very last years and months of MS in people who are experiencing a more rapid course. So some of the data is there, but you don't need to pay that much attention to it. Also that the type of injury, the type of demyelination we were seeing was more focused in the deeper brain structures, the kind of more ancient structures of our brain, which are important for getting up, getting about, mobility, that can be affected in some people with depression and fatigue as well. So structures like the structure called the pons, a part of the brainstem, and also within the thalamus. And also then that the nature of the inflammation was kind of spreading to some of these other compartments, the protective covering of our brain, the meninges, and around our blood vessels as well. So there's some differences in the biology of this MS as well. So just to summarize really what we learned, I think by looking at this not typical cohort of people experiencing more rapidly worsening course, is that we think that some of the earliest features can be measured but aren't typically captured in the clinic. Things, feelings of depression and fatigue, for example, which do associate with cortical pathology. And the MRI scans showed that cortical lesions were the single biggest predictor of a later rapidly worsening course. We know that cortical lesions are driven in part by this inflammation that is seen in the meninges and around blood vessels. And that the damage in these kind of higher order centers in the brain can be almost sensed, almost kind of reflected then by tissue injury and demyelination and some tissue shrinkage then in these deeper grey matter structures. And it's tissue injury here which really ultimately will dictate how severe somebody experiences their multiple sclerosis. So why are we interested in it? Why do we think this is useful? And what's the register done for us? Well, it's done a huge amount. I think it's made this study possible. And I think some of the key lessons is that maybe a better and more all-encompassing assessment of depression and fatigue is needed. And this is why the register is so helpful. We need to look at improving maybe MRI sequences and modalities then to better understand where the lesions are happening in people's in individuals' nervous systems, basically, throughout the disease, if possible. This information is really important. It helps us understand treatment of people who've been on their therapies for a long time as well, because some people probably don't need to receive treatment so much, but others, I think, probably would benefit from maybe switching or kind of a much more targeted treatment throughout their disease now, not just in the very early years. And then also the kind of the identification, the recognition then that some people can experience this more rapid changing course can help power clinical trials, for example. So we know then we'd have more people at risk in that trial group, for example. It can help us think about treatments which are better at targeting some of the biology which is most different in those groups. And it can also help us think about ways we would monitor how effective some of those experimental treatments were, for example. So I hope some of that has been helpful, and is those same faces again. And obviously, none of this would be possible. So it's really a profound thanks and gratitude really from us here at Swansea for your donations to the register, and also for those and their families who've given to the MS Tissue Bank over the years as well. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Owain. That was an excellent presentation. However, I'm now going to introduce Una Reid, who's going to talk. Una is a committed participant of the MS Register and has been since 2016. In 2021, she joined our participant engagement group, the Brainstormers, and Una is going to share with us why being involved in the register is important to her and some highlights from another year of participant involvement. So over to you, Una.
Okay, thank you, Rod. You've actually said a lot of what I was going to say. I've been part of the register for 9.5 years, and I've been part of the PPI group called the Brainstormers for nearly 5 years. And today I'm going to briefly talk about my reasons, and these are my personal reasons for joining the register. The PPI group, known as the Brainstormers, the meetings I've personally enjoyed this year, and briefly how I promote the register. My reasons for joining the register, I suppose, are varied, but part of my job, research was very much part of my job as an oncology nurse, paediatric oncology in the NHS. And I was also on the Research Ethics Committee for 6 years at the local trust where I worked in New Yorkshire. I've actually had MS since 1991. And when I was diagnosed, there was no DMTs, of course, available in 1991. But 8 years later, one became available. And I was very aware that people with MS must have been involved in all those clinical trials to get those drugs out. And now there's 20 drugs available, and it doesn't bear thinking about just how many people must have been involved over the years in research that I've never been part of. I just take the end result, let other people do the hard work. I became aware of the register from a MS Society newsletter in 2011, but I didn't join until 2016. And the reason for that, Rod, and I hang my head in shame, is I thought it would take a lot longer to complete these tedious, questionnaires that I was going to get. But it's not like that at all. But I thought it was going to be, because I was involved in research, so I knew what it was going to be like, and it was going to take me forever, but it doesn't. So I was delighted that it didn't. So I've been part of it since 2016. And I also felt it was important as a gateway to help future research, MS research, that I could take part in. Now, I became involved in the PPI group back in 2021. I'm assuming that's when it first started, and I don't remember how I heard about it. Again, it might have been in a newsletter, or it might have been on the register website itself. I'm not sure, I can't remember. And it's just to say it's monthly meetings, some with researchers discussing the topics, but others talking about the register itself. And really, we're just a group of like-minded people who like to give constructive criticism, both during the monthly 1-hour meetings or by email afterwards, or both. And if you can't attend the meetings, it's recorded, and you can still send comments afterwards, which is very helpful, because you don't like to think you're missing out, of course. I know so far that we've influenced web page design on the register, the font size, questionnaire ideas, and we've provided feedback to the researchers on their potential studies that I hope they found useful. We also have suggested some ways to promote the register, things like leaflets, posters, reminders to participants to complete questionnaires. Thank you to participants once they've filled out the questionnaires, short ones, and QR codes and posters, etc. In 2025, we had various researchers presenting throughout the year, and there was one in April where there was 2 very different studies in the one meeting that I was delighted to hear about. One was the beneficial effects of pregnancy on MS, and the other researcher at that meeting was talking about the socioeconomic impact of not receiving DMTs. So 2 very different studies, but both very interesting. We also had feedback on the annual conference, the ECTRIMS conference that you attend. And also I just wanted to mention the menopause study, and the fantastic recruitment that she achieved through the register. I think she achieved 300% on what she was hoping to achieve. Fantastic. And she also won an award, I think, for her poster at the ECTRIMS conference. Promoting the register. Now, as you can tell, I'm a bit of a talker. I like to do information stands in supermarkets, usually doing a fundraiser as well, and in-person get-togethers to promote the local group, the MS Society, MS Register and MS Tissue Bank. I set up a table and I've got all leaflets set out. And also items with logos on are very helpful. Things like pens and post-it notes, and people do like a pen or a supermarket trolley token. And questions get asked, so what is the register? What is this about? And all the leaflets that come with that. You can also consent to link your register data with your medical records held at your treatment centre if they're participating. However, the map on the register on the homepage will show you if your centre is participating or not. And I'm so sad to say that there are none in Scotland signed up. And I came from Yorkshire, but I was signed up. And I think, Ellie, you said to me, equitable access to research. This is my key phrase. And I've got a theory that I think there's some confusion, having spoken to local people now, because they said, well, there is a register in Scotland. I said, yeah, there is, but that's only for newly diagnosed people from 2010. And I think it's caused some confusion. So I'm hoping locally I might have helped. But I'm hoping also that I might be able to change a few views in time. I've only been back in Scotland since 2024. I will continue to mention this on a yearly basis at my clinic appointments, and I'll do whatever I can to help to get Scotland on the map on the MS Register. Lastly, I'd like to thank Rod, Ellie, Leah and all your colleagues for the continuation of the register. I think it's very valuable, and also for the Brainstormers group. Thank you. Back to Rod.
Thank you. Some very generous words there, and some excellent sentiments for everything, and your experiences of being a participant on the register, and for your work with the Brainstormers. We very much appreciate it. So, thank you. We've seen the questions coming in as they've gone, so I think some of them I'll try and deal with very, very quickly before I hand over to my more learned colleagues. But the work in Scotland, I think, is quite appropriate based on what you've just said in it as well. We have tried to work in Scotland, and we briefly had Glasgow as a clinical site if we go back about 5 years. For whatever reason, that didn't happen. We obviously have lots of participants in Scotland, so keep joining up, keep giving data, all that kind of stuff, and we will keep promoting the ability to promoting to work with Scottish NHS sites as well. The fact there is a Scottish register does cause confusion. They are different things, but I think appealing to your clinicians a little bit may help as well, a little bit for the Scottish participants. And as a fellow Scot, I do feel the pain there for people. So it absolutely, we'll keep pushing away at it. We had one question: if you have something else going at the same time, you've got flu or something like that, you just answer the questionnaires as you feel now. It may be that you've got a hangover or flu or something else going on, or you've stubbed your toe 5 minutes ago. It doesn't matter. Just answer it as you feel right now. That's kind of the point of the questionnaires. We've one report about two of the questionnaires, three of the questionnaires being broken. We'll look at that straight away for the new lifestyle questionnaires. We'll do that. And one last question that I'm going to deal with about changing or adding or modifying surveys or things like that as we go along. We do that in the sense that we do put in new guest questionnaires, like Cognitron, for example, that we've asked from time to time, and the lifestyle questionnaires that we're asking now. But it's really difficult when you've got an ongoing data collection to see if things change over time, to just put in something and make major changes to the ongoing survey. And I think, again, Annalaura's and Owain's work both covered that you need that consistent data collection of the same sort of instruments over time to determine if there's any change in those instruments. And they're quite carefully calibrated for looking at those changes. So it's tempting to put in new things, and we try to do new things occasionally. And, again, the lifestyle questionnaire is an example of that. But it's something we've got to be very careful about moving forward. Even if you don't feel it reflects your MS right now, the chances are they are picking up things that may not be apparent from just the questions you're answering. So do keep, please, answering the ones that we have as we go. And we are sensitive to modifying things subtly over time as well. But hopefully that answers the question. So that's all the stuff for me that I think I've got time to answer now. We have a couple of questions for Owain. So I'll just read this out verbatim, Owain, and I'll let you give the answer. Statistics are great to recognise how MS has changed over time. However, what proportion have had an intervention and the results that have remained static or not got worse? So that's, I think, in line with what you were doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. Thanks again, Rod. Thanks, everyone. Enjoyed the talk as well. Fantastic. The group that have responded, so people who respond well to treatment, who haven't worsened, that's the hope for everyone, isn't it? I think that's amazing and that's wonderful. And I completely ignored those people in this study. So we've gone after those who have really changed, who seem kind of either not to respond to their treatment or for some reason chose not to take treatment, even though their MS was probably, it may have been treatable for some of those people. I think that's another study, isn't it? I think the good side of MS, the good story, of how effective these treatments are working. I'm not sure how well that gets out there. It doesn't always fit the kind of the political need to keep pouring money into new drug trials and such things as well. So I think we need to be sure that the positives here are emphasised as well as the rooms for improvement, as well as the gaps, I guess. As well.
And another question: do you think that MRI scans should now include cortical imaging as standard?
Fab question. Yes, absolutely. So cortical imaging is not a new thing. We've been able to see some of these cortical lesions, not all of them, but we see the bigger lesions, the ones which spread over greater regions of the cortex quite well. And that technology has been around for years and years and years. The resources to do it, either the skilled radiologists, neuroradiologists, people who understand how to kind of read and interpret these scans, and also the resources to get enough people scanned just don't exist, I think, at the moment. So part of the new revised criteria for recognising MS does include some information about cortical lesions, but only a few centres in the UK, for example, could do that bit of that. So I think there is certainly an opportunity there, and maybe our work and the work of others now can help sort of raise the flag there and help to push the argument for greater work around this area.
Great. Thank you, Owain. So well done. And thank you all once again for listening. Thank you to our presenters for making such excellent presentations. Thank you to Ellie and Leah for organising all this in the first place. And thank you to the MS Society for continuing to support the MS Register. I think hopefully we've shown once again that it's really important why we get the data and what we do with it and the difference it makes to people with MS, to research and to what we're doing in this sort of field in the UK today. So thank you once again, and have a Merry Christmas and enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.